just because we're against the clock. I know Jay's got to shoot off. So welcome to everyone that's come and joined us today. This is the fifth and final day of our Masterclass series from the Dome. So today we're looking at a range of things, but predominantly I think lifestyle is going to be a key theme of today. And it's coming from the perception of a professional player. So again, you've kind of, if you've tuned in this week, you know that this is the Dome's kind of series where we're trying to promote the holistic approach to long-term athletic development. And we're really trying to emphasize how for young football, soccer players, the holistic approach to development is really important rather than just keeping it at technical and tactical. So we've done great this week so far with psychological, technical, physical. Yesterday was talent identification. And today we're looking at lifestyle. So really excited with today's. Again, just a couple of housekeeping things. Make sure your microphone's switched off and make sure your video is disabled. All communication will happen through the chat room while the two guys are discussing the theme of today. Any questions you have, please put them in the chat room and I'll be watching that, and I might jump in from time to time with your questions. So make sure you utilize the chat function. Just now to introduce the two guys that are going to be discussing today. So first of all, I'd like to introduce our own president and GM of the Dome, Noah Welch. Noah's going to be facilitating the discussion. And I'm really, really pleased. I've been delighted with everyone this week, but this is a really special one for me. So I'd really like to welcome Jason McCarthy. Jason's obviously based in the UK. Jason's a professional soccer player with Millwall in the Championship, and currently at the moment, although we're in this shutdown, he's on loan with League One Wycombe Wanderers. I'm sure you'll find out more about that and the journey Jason's been on. But Jason's a player I know from a long time ago, and I think that might crop up in the discussion, so I'll leave that. We're going to be finishing around 10 to 1 in Canada, and so we've got to make sure we get through this quickly. So I'm going to hand it over. Noah, Jay, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. I've gotten to get to know Macker. I call him by his nickname now. We're on that basis, but it's been awesome. He's a guy that I wish that I could have been teammates with, that's for sure. And so I'm super excited to interview him. And Macker, thanks again for taking the time to do this. My first question to you, very broad, but for those that don't know you, that maybe aren't diehard soccer fans, who is Jason McCarthy?
I would say Jason McCarthy, the footballer, is hardworking, very intense. I like to think of myself as a leader, and someone who kind of sets the standard. I would say Jason McCarthy, the person away from football, is very different, very relaxed, quite likes the simple things in life, just being with family and sort of holding them family values very close to my heart.
Awesome. So one thing that I ask a lot of kids that come into the Dome, it's a simple question. Do you have a dream? Because a lot of our athletes are younger. And so, one, do you have a dream right now or a long-term goal? And two, did you have a dream growing up?
Yeah, so it's easier probably to answer the latter first. So when I was younger, all I ever remember was being absolutely obsessed with Liverpool. And my role model was Steven Gerrard. I used to play centre midfield. I play right back now, but Blakey will tell you, I used to play centre midfield. I was a box to box, and I modelled my game on Steven Gerrard, even though Jason Blake said I was more like Frank Lampard. And that broke my heart that day when he told me that. But I would say I modelled my game on a Steven Gerrard, and he was my role model. I had pictures of him everywhere in my room. I was obsessed. All I wanted to do was lift the European Cup for Liverpool. I'll never forget watching Istanbul in my living room with my family. Istanbul, for those of you who do not know, it was a Champions League final game for Liverpool. and we were 3-0 down at half time. Ended up the game flipping on its head. Liverpool won, and the European Cup is like the king of all clubs in Europe. So that was such a massive night for me, and one I'll never forget. So when I was younger, my dream was to play for Liverpool in the Premier League, and I always aspired to do that. And yeah, like I said, I was obsessed with it. I'd say my dream now is, it's definitely a lot more refined, but I think you sort of get to maybe a stage in your career where you kind of see you're finding your level, and you find maybe where you really feel like at your push, at your top, you really feel like you could compete at that level. You may surpass it, you may actually not ever get there. Football is so surprising and so fast paced. It's part of the joys of it. But I would say now is to become an established championship player would be my dream goal at the moment.
Awesome. Well said. Well said. Going back to your childhood, and we're going to progress in this interview to now, and we're going to do it fairly quick, but going back to your childhood and looking back now as a pro, how important was it to have that dream, even though it was really far-fetched, but looking back, how important was that, and how did that translate over to how you went about your business as a young lad?
I would say it is absolutely pivotal. I think at the age you don't really think about how important it is, but I think it really is when you look back on things, because times are tough. Times do get tough sometimes when you are younger, where there's contracts coming up yearly in academy football, in which you're aspiring to, and sometimes you're not sure if you're going to get them or not. But I think if you always have your mindset on the love of the game and why you started playing the game to start off with, I think that you'll always come back to that. I think that will always be there, and that will always be something you turn to. Your passion and love for the game should be the very reason for why you play it. And I think that your dream and your goals from a young boy is kind of built off that, and that's installed in you. And I think that it's so important to have a dream, to have a goal, to have a target, even if it seems quite far-fetched. If in your head it is achievable and it is possible, then I think there's only good can come from it. So I think it's super important. And I think having a dream for me when I was younger was, I just have such fond memories of it, and such, yeah, I think it's pivotal.
Oh, that's awesome. I would agree. And there's not one that's too big, so to speak, right? Because if you don't get there, man, there's other things that will happen along the way that are going to be so good. So we encourage all kids. In fact, if kids come in here and they're like, I don't know, I'm like, I'm going to ask you next week. Come up with one. Really important, or a long-term goal. That brings me to my next question. And you mentioned it, that, yeah, life is hard, right? We face adversity in life, whether it's on the pitch, off the pitch. Again, looking back, I trust that your soccer career has not been this golden road that has been no adversity. So what are some specific examples, anytime in your past, whether it was a little kid or last week or whatever it is, right, that you can look back on and be like, you know what, that sucked going through, but man, did that help in the grand scheme of my career?
Yeah, definitely. There's many, like you said, there is actually a lot when you sort of get into it, and you think there are actually a lot of low points. But I would say my first big one and my first real test of me as a player, and if I was going to sink or swim, I use that phrase a lot. And I think because football is so fast paced, you get a lot of times where you could sink or you could swim. And I think there was a really pivotal moment in my career looking back where I was just breaking into the first team at Southampton. So for those of you who don't know, Southampton was my club where I came through at. I came right through the academy with Blakey. I started from the ages of 8, and I went right through till I was 18. So 10 years with the club, and it was where I was born. There was all sorts of articles about me being the next big thing coming out of Southampton. We just had won like the Reserve Cup, which is like the team you go into before you go into the first team. I was the captain. There was a lot of publicity and hype around me. I just made my debut under Ronald Koeman. You said there was a Dutch caller on there tonight, Noah, so they'll be buzzing off that. So I made my debut under Ronald Koeman, and a lot was good. So that was the end of my season when I turned 18. The following year, I was, because of my ambition and how driven I am, I was very adamant that I was either going to be seen as a first team player or I was going to go on loan and be seen as a first team player somewhere else, just because I wanted to see my career doing that and my development doing that. When I made kind of that decision, I was expecting Southampton to turn around and say, well, we see you as a first team player. And it ended up that I ended up going on loan to a team in League Two so I was in the Premier League at this point, Championship, League One, League Two. So it's the fourth division in English football. So I ended up going to League Two. And do you know what? It was such a big decision for me. I was leaving home where I'd been for 10 years. I was leaving the comfortable, familiar surroundings of Southampton. And it was a very much sink or swim time. But I really used that first kind of rejection, so to speak, to my advantage. And it drove me on. And I kind of used the point of, I'll prove you wrong, even if it takes the long game. You know, I'm starting in that division, but I'm going to work my way up and show I can play at that level. So that was the kind of thing that drove me and that allowed me to swim instead of sink, I'd say.
That's awesome. That was brought up yesterday on our call. A lot of the call yesterday of identifying talent was about character. It really was, because how can you predict what a 6 or 8 year old kid is going to do when they're 18, right? But there's certain indicators or spark moments that was brought up yesterday and they were all under the umbrella of character. Like, this is a character kid, right? You told me an example it had something to do with speed when you were younger, and there was some sort of test. And that was a sink or swim moment too. So can you briefly describe that? Because honestly, we've seen some kids now that the backdrop I want to create is we are starting to implement an academy structure that models the English Premier League here in Central Alberta in the Dome. And Jason's doing that. And there will be some kids that will get cut from the highest team within the Dome. But that does not mean their career is over. That just means that there's another place that we think they're better at this point in their development, right? And I want the kid that says, I'm going to prove you wrong, right? And Jason Blake does too. So what's your example about that speed test that came up, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so I was under 12s at the time, so 11 or 12 years old, and I was at a stage where I was probably very high in the group, but even at a very young age, I knew that all the other kids were more talented than me. All the other players I was playing with were more talented than me. I could understand, I could see it, because I knew that they weren't putting in the work I was doing, and I was only a bit ahead of them. And I knew that if they were doing the work I was doing, then they would creep up on me. So I was obsessed with practice and training I had to stay at that level because I knew I wasn't as gifted as they were. And so I was very up on those things. And then we had speed trials, and it was the first time we'd done them. And it was like agility, 5 meter, 10 meter and 20 meter. And I remember we got the results back and I was like last on everything. And I was so embarrassed. I remember going home in the car crying, like with these speed tests, thinking I'm going to get released. I'm going to get released. I could see the way football was going, even at the youngest of age. I was obsessed with it. And I knew that it was becoming more and more about speed. That's hence why the club was doing speed trials. I was bottom on everything. I remember the next session, and I went in and I asked my manager, who was Mark Chamberlain at the time, and I said, when are we next doing the speed trials? He said, we'll be doing them monthly. That month, kidding you not, I put the sheet of the results on the end of my bed. So every morning I woke up, I saw the sheet. I saw I was bottom of the list, and I had it highlighted, my name, bottom of the list. And I didn't know how I was going to get quicker, but I knew that I would have to be practicing running at my maximum a lot. And even like hill sprints and stuff. I remember Googling online what can get your acceleration quicker. And every day I was out in the garden, dragging my dad out with me with a stopwatch, 5 meter, 10 meter every day, timing me, looking at the sheet, knowing what I had to do to get into the top 3. That was my target. I wanted to get in the top 3, which is a big turnaround. We had like a squad of 15 kids. So that would have been a big turnaround. But the next time the results came round and stuff, and the test came in, I was in the top 3 for everything. And I think that was a big sort of point, like you said, where it was a sink or swim time, and I could have been okay with the results, or I had to use that to my motivation, and my motivation was sticking it at the end of my bed, so I can't get away from it.
That's awesome. I hope kids are taking notes, or parents are taking notes. But I would also argue, Macca, that when you went from the bottom to the top, the bottom, it didn't break you, which was great. But the work that you put in to now be in the top 3, that might have unlocked a door of endless possibilities for your career. Do you know what I mean? Like, you get those moments as an athlete where you're like, wow, with the right coaching, with the right drive, with the right focus, what am I capable of doing, right? And if you didn't have that adversity, you would never really know. And so I love hearing those stories about, something that's, quote, negative, right? And it's not. Like, when you look at a young athlete's career, like, they're devastated, right? We had provincial tournaments in soccer here, and then they're crying, the teams, and then the other teams are cheering. And you would think, like, this 10-year-old little girl that just lost, like, she thinks like everything's over her life. And I'm like, you have no idea in the grand scheme of things. This is actually good. It's going to motivate you, or it might break you, and we'll see, right? And so it seems like that motivated you. So real quick, you mentioned your dad on the call. How did he influence you growing up? What were things that he did well? What were things, you have a son or a little girl?
Yeah, I have a son.
11,
He's just coming up to 1. Yeah, 11 months.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just things you learned. I know your dad was a big influence. Briefly, what things did he do that have really just helped build a foundation for you? And then what things are you going to take from that, maybe change for your boy that's growing up?
Yeah, so my dad was a big influence on my my sort of journey. He still is. But I would say my dad was super intense, and he helped. He was, and it kind of rubbed off on me to a degree. But I think that he always let me know when I wasn't working hard. I think whenever my performance was down, I never really remember my dad telling me he would always tell me he didn't think I played well, but he would never get to the level where I thought, where I was hearing it, and it was a little bit more like a lot. Whereas when I wasn't working hard, and my dad could see that, I knew about it. And even though maybe I may tailor that and sort of brush it up a different way to my son, it definitely helped me, and it definitely helped me understand that working hard for my teammates and working hard for me is the least I can do when I cross that white line. I'm privileged that I've got the job that so many people and kids will want and are striving for. I have kids who are 14, 15 years old who are going to be trying to take my spot in a couple of years' time. So I'm privileged that I'm in the position where I'm playing in front of thousands of people every week. So he's definitely installed that. I value it so much now, hard work, and I think it's the least you can do. And it's the main reason to why I ended up ended up paving a career. It's funny, I just want to share this quick. I saw something the other day online about Robin Van Persie and his son. I shared it with you, Noah, and I thought it was so powerful. And he shared that his son wasn't playing in a game. It was Feyenoord against Ajax, and his son's at Feyenoord. So a big game, right? And his son's not starting. He didn't come on. He didn't play. And he's in the car on the way home. And Van Persie, so Van Persie's son says to him, he's moaning and he's whinging and complaining about the manager to why he didn't play and why he didn't come on. And Van Persie says, you know what you sound like? You sound like a loser. And he said to his son, he said, look, it's not going to bother me whether you make it or you don't. I love you still the same. It's not going to change me and how I treat you and how I perceive you. I love you all the same. But if you want this, then you need to have a look at yourself, because at the moment you sound like a loser. What are you going to do to get back in the team? No point talking about it. What are your actions going to determine? And that kind of reminded me quite a lot of how my dad was with me. And it always got a good reaction out of me. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well said. Well said. Now we're going to get into more current or last few years of your career. How do you deal with, quote, failure on the field? So having a bad game, or maybe tell a story how about you were the GOAT of a game where like your mistake led to the team losing, because I can give plenty of examples over my career of when that's happened, right? And so again, those are those sink or swim moments, right? Like they break some people. How do you deal with it personally?
Do you know what? To be really honest, I've been really blessed with great managers that when I've been in the team and I've made a mistake, they've put an arm around me when I needed one, and they've told me that to put it behind me and encouraged me and showed me good clips about myself. So I think that's where you need to have a good manager and support system around you, because it can be tough for a player when you're making mistakes, especially if you're repeating mistakes, because you're going to do that as young players. You're learning, and you're trying to sort your game to what suits you. So you're going to make mistakes. You're even finding out things about yourself as a player as you go. So these things are going to happen. I think that's when you need to be really blessed to have good managers around you, people that are going to support you, and tell you that it's okay to make mistakes. But I think that's where video comes into it. That's where you really have to look into your game, and really sort of sink in on the detail. And you have to learn quick. But you need that support system around you as well.
Yeah, that's well said. You mentioned video. To me, that was so important. As a player, I was kind of a guy that was known for watching a lot of video, because the video doesn't lie, right? And so you might feel a certain way. Yeah, I played great, and you might look at the stat sheet and like, wow, look at this, that. And then you watch the video and you're like, I got away with a lot of mistakes or mediocrity, right? And then on the other hand, it's like, man, I made this one costly play that cost us the game. But then you watch your clips and you're like, I actually overall, I was rock solid besides this one mistake that I made. And so the quicker in the proper setting an athlete can break down their game on video with the right support staff of encouraging, acknowledging the mistake, trying not to repeat it, I think that is just gold for an athlete. In addressing it head on. Like I always use the image of a ship with a big wave. You can't turn this way as the ship and kind of ignore like the wave coming, or it's going to take the ship out. You have to align the ship. Here comes the wave. Here was my mistake in the game. Like you just said, I'm the slowest one in the speed, results there. You acknowledge it. You're putting this thing in front of your face every day when you wake up. You're taking that wave, and now you're like, let's go. I'm going to work our way out of it, right?
Yeah.
It seems like that kind of defines you as a player. I want Jason Blake to come in and tell a story about you, because for me, when it comes to athletic development, they have 5 pillars, essentially, is what we at the Dome acknowledge. So we have our technical, our tactical, right? Those are the on-field part of the game that we develop. Then we have our physical, our S&C. We got to get bigger, faster, stronger, right? And you've even said, Macker, that in soccer right now, if you don't have speed, you don't make it. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are at the ball. You just can't cut it, right? Then we have the mental toughness side of the game, which is key. And then we have the lifestyle part. And the lifestyle part to me is all about character, right? And character, some people, it comes more natural, but you can teach it, actually. You can teach it. It seems like you were just a leader. Jason told me a story before. I would love him to come on and tell a story. My point of telling the story, though, is for any kids that are listening to this now, is like, you could be this person. You know what I mean? Like, you can do this. And I want to encourage kids. So, JB, take it away.
Will do. Macca, sorry to embarrass you with the story again, bud. Also, once I've finished, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A. I might just fire a couple of quick fire ones of those out as well. So, Jason and I worked together when he would have been 9 years old, under 10s coach at Saints, Southampton. And we had some, as Jay alluded to, we had some talented players in the group. And Southampton's based on the south coast of England, and we would play in the southern region, and we would go into London and play some of the biggest clubs, Tottenham, Arsenal, Chelsea. On this day, we were playing Chelsea. And under 10s, we driving up there, the rain was horrendous. It was a monsoon. It was absolutely smashing down. And we're playing at Chelsea. And Chelsea at this time they had the rich owner. Their training ground had been developed probably before any others. I think we were playing on field number 42 of their training ground, which was incredible. And I remember our players were in the dressing room, and I walked out and I saw all the Chelsea players and these lads. It was absolutely lashing down, and the Chelsea players were laughing, joking, loads of confidence. They had their big posh raincoats on. They were kicking a ball around, and I'm looking, thinking, okay. And then our lads start walking out, and our lads are kind of all scrunched up, and they're drenched, and they're looking up, and you could just see they were absolutely hating the rain. And I'm looking at our lads walking out. I'm thinking, oh my God, them lads there are so confident. Our boys look like they're so scared of what's happening. And then at the back, this young player walks out. He hasn't got a raincoat on. He's just got his kit on, sleeves rolled up, screaming at all the other players, come on, lads, this is Chelsea. We've got to go out and give it to them. I ain't having any of this here. This is their turf, and we're going to bring it to them. And this was a 9-year-old kid, and it was Jason McCarthy. And the significance to me is, one, actually, it was Jay's mentality that day that actually lifted the rest of the players. And ironically, not that the scores really matter, but we drew the game 4-4 that day. And it was Jay playing in each period, dragging the team through the game and not allowing them to let the conditions, the environment, the opposition, the venue get in their heads. And actually, we didn't get beat that day. And it might not be unfair to say, Jay, but pound for pound, they were probably better than us. But I think our character, what you instilled on the day to the rest of our players is what got us through the game, which was really important. And then just linking to what Tom said yesterday with the talent ID thing, it's actually, Jason, that my philosophy of talent ID and stuff, I've got a phrase that I use is see the boy, see the man. Because I look at what Jay was at 9 years old, and what everything that's been said so far in this interview, it hasn't surprised me, because I kind of saw the watered down version of Jay at 9 years old to what grew and developed in him. So he's actually influenced my coaching and my long-term kind of assessment of players with a mentality of see the boy, see the man, which was really good. So that was a significant thing. And I've got other ones through the time I had with Jay and a few bits and pieces. Jay, I do just want to remind you, we speak about the Lampard-Gerrard one. You do know that Frank Lampard had to improve his speed, and he went out every day doing running. Kind of helped my theory a little bit there. Couple of questions, just I'm going to throw at you quickly because I want to get back to you two, is First one I'm going to throw is from Keenan, and I think, Jay, you might have answered it, but in one word answer, who was or is the biggest supporter of your footballing career?
Yeah, my dad.
I think so, and I saw it firsthand, and he gave you so much responsibility to decide whether you were in or out. But if you were in, you had to put the shift in every day.
Yeah.
And I think we've spoke this week about support mechanisms for players. I think your family were absolutely fundamental and a great icon for anybody that was around us of how support should look like, which was really good. Quick one from Stephen. Jay, how do you mentally prepare for a match in a 2-sentence answer?
I watch a lot of videos on my opposition, and I have a pre-match routine that I like to stick to.
So a very consistent approach to what you do pre-match every week, every game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something I like to do that helps me get in the zone and lets me know that it's match day.
Brilliant, good stuff. Interesting one from Curtis, and I know I think he's got a couple of people there watching with him. What's it like playing with Akinfenwa, probably one of the strongest players in the English professional divisions?
Do you know what? He's an absolute pleasure. First of all, he's a gentleman. He's really good in the dressing room, priceless actually in the dressing room. And what I mean by that is not what he offers like comically. I mean his leadership. He's a proper leader. And there's maybe a lot of facade around him, but when push comes to shove, he's a warrior, and you want him in the trenches with you. So it's an absolute joy to share the dressing room with Akinfenwa.
Yeah, and anyone who's not aware of him, Google his name. He's an outstanding character from what I've seen from afar, and Jay's alluded to it firsthand.
I just Googled this guy. He's a monster.
What does he call himself?
Is this
The
guy
beast.
a soccer player or is he a linebacker in football? That's the right guy. I think I got the wrong guy. I'm serious.
No, that's him, the beast.
That's him.
Played soccer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, Noah, I'm going to hand it back over to you, and there's a couple of other questions that might crop up, and if we've got time at the end, I'll throw them over to you.
Sounds good. Yeah. I have basically two questions and then a few if we can get to them, but the two important questions, I'm going to play off of the story that Jay told you about. And that's, you were leading right there, and you were vocally leading. There'll be some kids on this call and some parents that identify their kids as non-vocal. That's not me. I always led vocally, but I've also led non-vocally too. Can you give examples of how a young kid can lead, but it doesn't have to be in kind of the rah-rah way in the story that we just heard, which is a great story. I don't want to take anything away from that, but it's sometimes maybe not in that child's personality. I want to encourage kids that you can lead in so many different ways, and you can be a team guy in so many different ways. So what are some examples that you've seen, maybe some of your current teammates that are quiet but are great leaders? Talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think I've spoke about him a lot tonight, but Steven Gerrard was not supposed to be a vocal leader in a sense. He was meant to be very different. I think in ways I've experienced of leadership over the years and teammates I've played with who I consider a leader, but not like you say, your typical barking out the orders. I would say are people who are very professional in their approach. So people who are first to training. So this is something that is well within your control. Turning up first to training. So getting there on time, making sure you're prepared. I think making sure that you can be last from training, you can do extra ball work. So extra work on your own game. You're taking responsibility and leadership of your own game. And I think that someone who demonstrates by example, leads by example on the pitch, can be in their game, just in their game. So working hard. It could be literally within the first minute of a game, and there's a 50-50 challenge in the middle of the pitch, and you clean the opposition out and you win the ball. And that is leadership. You are there being a leader, and you're leading by example, and setting the tone for the game you're about to play to all your teammates. So that in that moment is leadership. So taking control of your own game, preparing right, being punctual, and doing extra work as well. I think those are some things where it doesn't have to be vocal, but you can still be showing leadership.
100%, yeah. And you win championships with those guys, right? Like, you can't have a bunch of Jason McCarthy screaming in the locker room, or it'd be like watching an episode of The View. You can't hear what any one of the people are saying, right? So, but you have those quiet leaders that are just dialed in. They know what their role is, and they just deliver day after day after day. So for me, consistency is huge. Hard working, they're usually your hardest workers. And they do that on a consistent basis. They don't always have to be your best players. And oftentimes some of the best leaders are not the go-to people. Like,
so true.
And then the third one I would add is that they're always accountable. So they're always like, yeah, they're willing to take criticism, and they're accountable for their actions. Those to me are like three huge things. And you don't have to mention one word to be a great leader in those things. You can be as quiet as you want, but you show up every day and you take care of those three things, you're a leader on the team. So, and then you got loud guys like us, right? That talk too
It's
much.
true.
Yeah,
it's true though. You need a blend. It's true.
Cool. We yeah, this is a neat one because and it gets into a little bit of how you mentally prepare, but can you go into more detail? What does your game day routine look like? And what does, say, like a practice day routine look like for you? But more like kind of game day. And also, we know that, well, spoiler alert, you don't just show up on a game day and expect to perform. There's a lot of lead up to the game day, right? So, but what does a typical game day routine look like for you?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just quickly put in as well, like on a Friday before a game, I like to do a lot of video on opposition. So the person I'm going to be playing against, their strengths, how I can nullify them, what they're not good at. So I'll do a lot of that to help me be mentally prepared for the game. And I probably watch, as much as I watch on them, I probably watch double on myself, on what I'm doing well, what things I'm doing good at, how my strengths can combat his weaknesses. So I do a lot of work on that, which helps me mentally tick a box in my head. Game day, if it's a 3 o'clock kickoff, personal preference, I like to wake up late. I like to have a nice lay-in. I like to wake up about 10:30, 10 o'clock. That was before I had a child, though, to be honest. But
Yeah.
yeah, to be fair, my wife's great on game day. She'll let me sleep in. So 10:30, have food around 11:15, 11:30. My food is normally, I don't like to eat too much, so porridge, a smoothie, and if I fancy it, a bit of toast. If not, I leave it. All personal preference on the day. I don't like to get to the game too early, because I don't like too long thinking about the game. So I'll probably leave my house. Got to be there for 1:30, so I'll leave my house about 1:45. Get to the ground about 1 o'clock. Leisurely get dressed, have a massage, and then start listening to music. Start getting myself in the zone, getting myself ready for the game.
Nice. And then what's kind of your cue before the game starts where you're like, let's go, like I'm ready? Like most elite athletes, they have their kind of cue where it's like, now you go from like, all right, like, yeah, we got a game today, you're kind of fired up, to now you're like a caged animal that's like, let open this gate and let go, right? Like, what is that for you?
I'd say when I come back in the dressing room. So once we've warmed up and we're back in the dressing room, I'd say that's when I don't really sit down. Like sometimes my manager at Ainsworth has to, when he talks to us before we go out, he says, Mac, it's like, sit down. Like, so I'm up, I'm bubbly, I'm on my feet, I'm talking to people, I'm getting myself ready to go, and I'm making sure everyone else is ready. It's funny, when I make sure everyone else is ready, it makes me feel ready. It's weird. It's a very weird thing, but that's what helps me think, yep, it's game time when we're back in the dressing room and we're waiting for the buzzer to go.
Nice. And then I got two questions off that. When do you realize that you're too excited? Because you got to find that balance, right? So when can you be too jacked up that it's going to affect your performance? Because at the end of the day, especially at your level, it's all about how you perform. It really is. And so you don't want that to cripple you, right? So how do you use it to motivate you? And then what are the triggers where you're like, all right, Macker, I'm a little too high right now. Like, I got to come down a bit.
I focus on my breathing. My breathing really helps. So often in that moment where the manager will say, like, before he's about to give his last final instructions, to be honest with you, Noah, right throughout the day of match day, I'm very aware of my breathing. I'm very aware of how, and it's something quite simple, but I'm just aware of my breathing and how I'm feeling. And I think if ever feels a little bit too much, I just bring it down. Just bring it down. And if it feels like a little bit low, like I feel too relaxed. So I think you can go both ways. Sometimes you can feel too relaxed and sometimes you can feel too high. So it's actually a very fine margin, but I think you can only get there consistently with routine and with a game day plan that you sort of abide by. So yeah,
great answer. And I would also say that you get there by trial and error, and that's part of sports. There's going to be times where you started a game off poorly because you were too jacked up, and then you learn from it, right? And so that's that constant message to kids. I mean, this is parenting, this is coaching. It's not so much about the mistake, it's how do you deal with the mistake, right? How do you move forward from the mistake that was made? And so, no, that's good. Do you take notes? You say you watch a lot of video. Do you take notes on your opponents and on your own games after the game? So post game, do you have notes? Do you have something you can go back to a year from now? I played this guy. He's on a different team now. This is the trends I saw. Do you do that?
Yeah, I do. I do it a lot. And I like to focus a lot on my strengths. I like to focus a lot on what I'm doing well. And I always think if you've got something you're good at, perfect it. Make it the thing that is the best in the league that you're known for. So I think it is really important that you do focus on your weaknesses, but also just equally focusing as much on your strengths as well and perfecting them and making them your niche, the thing that people know you for. And something that has really helped me is I knew I was a good crosser of the ball. I knew that I was good at crossing from my position, but I thought if I'm good at crossing the ball, then I should be good at set plays as well. I should be good at free kicks, at corners. And now I'm kind of known in my league as a bit of like a dead ball specialist. So that's just come from practice and from really honing in on my strength. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, this is more of a bit of a fun question, or two of them. What's your thoughts on diving in soccer?
So personally, not for me diving. I like the integrity of football. I would think honesty goes a long way within football. And I think that for me personally, it's not for me. And I say that I've been guilty of in some cases of us being 1-0 down in the game and our striker's through on goal and he's getting pushed all over the place and he's too honest and he stays on his feet and then I have a go at him. I was like, you should have gone down.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard when football's so fast paced at 100 miles an hour and it's going so quick. Sometimes you can feel contact and you will just go down and it will be instinct. I wouldn't say that's diving. It's a bit of a grey area, diving. But for me, the actual ones when you knock it past a player and no one touches you and you just dive on the ground, that's not for me. And I like the honesty and integrity in football.
Love it. And then last question, I don't want to end on that. Just really briefly, one maybe word or one sentence, one phrase. What do you love most about the game of football, or soccer, as we call it here?
I love how unpredictable football is. And I love that it can bring the whole range of emotions. And it's all part of the game. And you have to accept that when you go into it, that there's going to be real lows, but there's also going to be major highs. And I think that's the reason why everyone loves football so much, is because they're always chasing that high and that real sense. I love the team side of it as well. I love the sense of togetherness and community. And yeah, there's so many things. It's hard to sum it up, but I would say the range of emotions you can get with football is like no other. I love it.
Nice. Good. JB, do we have other questions or?
We are really up against time. So I think we're probably going to have to wrap the questions up. Jay's actually got a team meeting, I believe, in about 5 minutes time. So we've got to be real respectful. Before I hand over to you, Noah, first, Jay, I just want to say thanks very much for doing this. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been great to connect with you again. Super proud of you. I've made 2 pages of notes since you've been talking. I've learned so much just listening to you. I'm going to make 2 points. First one, I think, listening to everything you've said, I think one of the key things that I'm taking away in what you've done is you've been an expert at consistently maximizing what is in your control. From what you've told today, I've really kind of looked at that, and I'm reflecting on what's in my control and what I focus on. So a really big one. And then my message for everybody that's been watching is something you said quite early on. You were, and I've absolutely circled, highlighted this word. You were obsessed with training to stay ahead of the rest. Obsessed, I think, is such a key part of what you said. So they're 2 real strong messages for me. Jay, thanks a lot. Hopefully soccer gets back to normal soon and you're playing again, and I'll be watching from afar again and really appreciate it. So thanks a lot, dude. Appreciate it. And I'm gonna hand over to Noah to wrap it up. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks so much, Blakey. Legend.
And by the way, you're still the only person I appreciate and let call me Blakey, because I don't like it. But you and your dad are absolutely allowed. I told Noah early on that's not part of our vocabulary in
the dome. That's brilliant.
Brilliant. Cheers, Jay.
Yeah, Jay, if you got to go to your team meeting, you do it, Macker. I'm just going to wrap up with everyone on the call. But again, thanks so much. We got to meet someday in person. Maybe it's in Red Deer, or maybe it's when we take a team over to England to, a younger team to compete against some of the teams over there. So at some point it'd be great to meet up. But thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
That'd be awesome. Let's keep in touch. Definitely know.
Sounds good. And for everyone else on the call, thank you guys for tuning in. And this is day 5 of a great week of hopefully more of a picture of what athletic development is, what it consists of, and just the details of it that goes into each pillar of it. And that's really what we stand for here at the Dome. We're not just a nice facility. We are trying to develop people and athletes. And so Jason McCarthy, great example of my premise for building the Dome is everyone at one point in time starts out as a kid that just loves to play a certain sport, and with the right motivation and with the right coaches. And yeah, there's a lot of other things that we can't control. Dreams are accomplished. And if they're not, and we don't play in the English Premier League, the disciplines that athletes learn when they go through the process of athletic development, when it's properly taught, will help them in life. And that's more important in our opinion. And so we are super serious and committed to developing young men, young women, and we're using the platform of sports to do it. And some of our kids from Central Alberta will go on to play pro soccer someday. They really will. Most won't, but hopefully most will be more prepared in life in general to face the adversities that comes up in life. So thanks so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for some exciting announcements in the next couple of weeks about what we are doing with soccer here and what we're unrolling. And thanks again. We'll see you hopefully when Alberta Health allows us at the Dome soon.